Chung-yu's first impression of Lin Mi wasn't great. Not only was she completely unfazed by his outrageously good looks, but she also slammed the door in his face. When he persistently knocked on her door again, her expression was still as indifferent as before, though this time there was a hint of annoyance between her brows. Out of habit, Chung-yu kept a friendly smile on his face, thanks to his self-discipline as a handsome man. But once again, he was met with a cold rejection. Lin Mi's voice was colder than her expression. "I trust you can read. Even if you can't, you should at least recognize the words male and female. I'm looking for a female tenant." She paused, gave him a quick once-over, and continued, "It's pretty obvious that you're a guy." Chung-yu had always had his way with women. This was the first time he had faced such a cold reception, and in his moment of fluster, he blurted out, "I am a guy, but I'm a guy who likes guys. Does that count?" His voice went up a few octaves, just as someone happened to come up the stairs, giving him a strange look. Lin Mi was momentarily stunned, but Chung-yu took the opportunity to stride into her apartment. "I said I'm not renting to men." Lin Mi quickly caught up, stepping in front of him. Chung-yu, towering over her by more than a head, lifted his chin arrogantly, clearly intent on getting back at her. He ignored her completely, not even sparing her a glance. His gaze wandered around the living room, eventually landing on the wall where the TV would normally be. Strictly speaking, it wasn't a TV wall anymore. Instead, it had been turned into a display for staggered bookshelves filled with green plants, pothos, spider plants, ivy, giving the entire room a forest-like atmosphere. You could almost feel the coolness in the air. He scoffed. "The furniture is a bit old, and the landlady, well, let's just say, not ideal. But at least there are all these cute plants. I'll take it. Give me your Alipay account. I'll transfer a year's rent right away." Seeing Lin Mi frown, as if about to refuse again, he added, "I'll pay an extra 100 yuan a month." "Still no," Lin Mi replied. Chung-yu was convinced there were women in this world who neither cared for money nor good looks, but why did he have to be the one to meet one of them? As the saying goes, one lie leads to another, and Chung-yu quickly concocted a plan. He clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and dropped his usual pride, replacing it with a pitiful expression. "Do you really think I'm desperate to rent this place for no reason? The truth is, the guy I like lives in this neighborhood. I just want to be closer to him, to have more chances to see him. Can you help me with that?" 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. "Fine. Huh. I'll rent to you, as long as you agree to pay an extra 100 yuan a month and you pay the whole year up front. You'll stay in the second bedroom. When are you moving in?" Chung-yu was still processing Lin Mi's sudden change of heart. Was she moved by his flimsy story? Or had she been playing hard to get to raise the price? Why did she agree so quickly? Despite his confusion, Chung-yu responded, "I'll move in today. I've only got this one suitcase." Lin Mi glanced at the modest suitcase and warned, "If you leave before the year is up, I won't refund any rent." At this point, Chung-yu felt like he had lost all dignity, his charm, his good character. Everything had failed him with her. He couldn't even bother to argue anymore, and he headed straight to the guest room. In his mind, he blamed his father for this situation. If it weren't for him, would he have to suffer like this? 3 days after renting the room, Lin Mi regretted her decision. She agonized over how to ask Chung-yu to move out, even willing to offer him a couple hundred yuan in compensation. Honestly, it was her fault. Having never rented to anyone before, she had only considered renting to a woman. She hadn't thought about important details like work schedules or social habits. After 3 days of practically living with Chung-yu, seeing him all day except during mealtimes, she finally asked, "Don't you have a job?" He glanced at her lazily from the couch, where he had been lounging for hours, and after a long pause, answered, "I'm unemployed." Lin Mi's face remained expressionless, but Chung-yu noticed a slight twitch of her eyebrows, the faint curve of her lips, and most telling of all, she swallowed. He sensed a mix of shock, frustration, regret, and speechlessness. Seeing her discomfort, Chung-yu felt a sense of satisfaction. Sitting up, he flashed a harmless smile and reassured her. Even though I'm unemployed, I paid you the rent in full, didn't I? So, don't worry. I won't miss a payment. His unspoken message was clear. I've kept my end of the bargain, so you won't break the agreement, right? Lin Mi opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. In the end, she said nothing and retreated to her study, closing the door behind her. Out of sight, out of mind. Cheng Yu, feeling victorious, lay back down on the couch with a self-satisfied grin. He couldn't have been in a better mood. After a few days of living together, Cheng Yu felt he had figured out Lin Mi's temperament. She was like a paper tiger, putting on a cold face to scare people initially, but deep down, she was shy and timid, resembling a little white rabbit. No wonder he felt compelled to play the wolf and tease her. At first, he carelessly tossed his clothes on the sofa, forgetting that this wasn't his home. She simply frowned and neatly folded them before placing them back on the sofa. When he left some food uneaten and forgot to put it in the fridge, she cleaned it up for him. Thus, he intentionally started being careless. After a while, noticing that he was doing it on purpose, Lin Mi threw his belongings out and coldly said, I thought you didn't want them anymore. Cheng Yu suffered a silent loss, so he restrained himself for a while. But he soon discovered that there were times when Lin Mi couldn't handle him. Once, after taking a shower, he walked out shirtless just as Lin Mi was coming out to fill her cup with water. He saw her face instantly turn red, her gaze darting away from him as she nervously muttered, the water cup, before retreating into her bedroom, not daring to come out again. So, from time to time, Cheng Yu began to saunter around the living room shirtless, while Lin Mi pretended to be indifferent, busily doing her own thing without stealing a glance. But she couldn't withstand his deliberate sauntering in front of her. As the landlord, she could have ordered him to clean up his stuff and not walk around shirtless, but she was foolish enough to suggest switching rooms. Lin Mi said, You can stay in the master bedroom. It has a bathroom. This was your idea to switch. I won't charge you extra. Cheng Yu mimicked her tone from earlier, as if afraid she would regret it. Seeing Lin Mi nod, he added, You're a girl. It's more convenient for you to stay inside. I won't fight you for it. In this round, Cheng Yu felt he had emerged victorious. One day, Cheng Yu woke up early and stepped out of his room to find Lin Mi. She was barefoot, sitting on a tall stool, watering the plants on the green wall. She revealed a smile toward them, a genuine joy radiating from her, like a carefree woodland sprite. Sunshine and wind streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the curtains fluttered gently, casting soft shadows. The interplay of light and shadow danced across Lin Mi's feet and legs, resembling a beautiful melody and a fragrant breeze. Cheng Yu's senses, sight, hearing, and smell were all stirred, forever etching this moment in his memory. He quietly watched for a moment before approaching her, saying, You're quite gentle with them. Lin Mi, absorbed in her task, was startled by his sudden voice, letting out a little squeal as she nearly lost her balance and fell. Cheng Yu was quick-witted, catching her in his arms. He looked down at her while she looked up at him, their eyes locking, a subtle yet undeniable connection forming between them. Please put me down. Thank you, Lin Mi said politely. Cheng Yu, however, did not let go. Instead, he playfully lifted her up as if she were a child, prompting another surprised yelp from her. He laughed. Why are you so light? You're not even as heavy as my half-grown nephew. You must be under 90 pounds, right? Mind your own business. Let me down. Lin Mi's voice was filled with an unusual panic. No one had ever been this intimate with her before, and her face flushed with heat, her heart racing. It dawned on Cheng Yu that perhaps he was crossing a line. He coughed lightly and pretended to be nonchalant as he finally set her down. However, once he released her, he regretted it, thinking he should take this opportunity to tease her a bit more, leading him to feel rather gloomy. This gloominess continued to escalate until when Xu Yuan arrived, not alleviating his mood but intensifying it. First, Lin Mi was acting strangely. She had actually swapped her usual t-shirt and shorts for a dress. When he asked her about it, She matter-of-factly replied, when Gus said girls should wear more dresses. Then, she hurriedly clarified her relationship with him, repeatedly explaining to Wen Xiuyuan that he was just her tenant. Finally, she was smiling so widely at Wen Xiuyuan that she looked like a blooming flower. Well, if a slight smile could be considered a bloom. Although Chengyu didn't want to admit it, they did seem like a pair, one warm and gentle, the other cool and aloof. They stood chatting in front of the green wall, and he felt an inexplicable pressure, as if a green cloud was looming over him. But he had no idea why he felt this way. When Xiuyuan smiled and said, "A colleague of mine said your spider plant is doing well. He wants me to buy another pot." "Sure, pick one out," Lin Mi replied softly, as Wen Xiuyuan often helped her introduce customers to buy her potted plants. "Why not come over for lunch today? My mom said she hasn't seen you in a while and wanted to get together," Wen Xiuyuan suggested with a smile. "Sure," Chengyu replied first, as if the question had been directed at him, and then added, "You don't mind if I tag along, do you?" When Xiuyuan didn't say anything, his gaze fixed on Chengyu. From the moment he entered, he had deliberately ignored Chengyu, but now their eyes met, and he scrutinized him closely. When Xiuyuan noted that Chengyu was handsome, with a certain languid charm in his features that gave off an air of nonchalance and rebellion. He wondered internally if Lin Mi would be attracted to such a distinctly different personality and what her feelings for him were. However, Chengyu maintained a half-smile, making it hard to guess his true feelings. While Wen Xiuyuan assessed Chengyu was also observing him, their gazes locked in a silent confrontation. There was no need for Lin Mi to introduce them. Chengyu already knew his name, including details about his job and family. Chengyu was here specifically for him, more precisely for his mother. Wen Xiuyuan was the complete opposite of Chengyu, meticulous, serious, and gentle. Yet beneath his seemingly mild demeanor lay a strong-willed heart, evident from his initial deliberate disregard for Chengyu. Chengyu glanced between the two of them, quickly concluding that Wen Xiuyuan had a bit of an interest in Lin Mi, while Lin Mi was too naive to notice. But he wasn't kind enough to play matchmaker. Lin Mi observed both men, recalling how Chengyu had spent days lounging on the sofa, staring out at the opposite building, and remembering his initial comment about liking boys. He knew Wen Xiuyuan. Her heart began to piece things together. "Let's do it another day. I'll go see the teacher then. I have something to do today," Lin Mi declined. Some people, even in love, can be overly restrained and measured. Wen Xiuyuan was one such person. He believed he understood Lin Mi well enough not to push her, always thinking there would be another opportunity. He smiled and said, "Just let me know in advance when you plan to come over, so I can prepare your favorite food." Lin Mi nodded and accompanied Wen Xiuyuan to the door. "You're his mother's student?"
Chengyu asked, surprised. "Yeah."
He continued, "Then you must know what his mother likes, right? What kind of—" "I think you should save your breath," Lin Mi interrupted. "The teacher probably can't accept same-sex relationships. When Go likes girls, I've seen his ex-girlfriend." Lin Mi had initially planned to say it more gently, but seeing Chengyu so eager to inquire about her teacher's preferences, almost as if he wanted to find a roundabout way to save the day, she decided it was better to let him face the truth sooner rather than later. After all, it was better to endure a brief pain than a long one.
"What?
Are you saying me and Wen Xiuyuan?" Chengyu exclaimed, shivering at the thought, his expression akin to someone struck by lightning. Looking at Lin Mi's expression that clearly said, "What else could it be?" he realized what it meant to lift a stone only to drop it on your own foot. Chengyu had a complete taste of it. Lin Mi prepared lunch and found herself pacing back and forth in front of Chengyu's door, hesitating over whether to invite him to eat with her. Forget it. He probably doesn't want to see himself right now, Lin Mi thought to herself. Just as she was about to turn away, the door opened. "Do you need something?" Chengyu asked with a cold expression. "I made lunch. If you're going out, then forget it," Lin Mi said, inviting someone for the first time but already leaving herself a way out. Chengyu picked up on her awkwardness and barely managed to smile. "It's too hot. I don't feel like going out." With that, he headed straight for the dining table, and Lin Mi sighed in relief as she followed him. They sat at the table, and Lin Mi didn't know what to say, while Chungyu was still feeling uncomfortable. Neither of them spoke, and the only sounds were the clinking of chopsticks and chewing. After a while, Chungyu noticed Lin Mi had no intention of breaking the silence, so he reluctantly asked, "You don't go out much. What work do you do?" "I'm an illustrator," Lin Mi replied. "CG or hand-drawn?" "I prefer hand-drawn, but I get more CG work." Chungyu nodded, suddenly recalling the potted plant when Xu Yuan had bought. He was about to ask but hesitated, fearing she might misunderstand. Instead, he tapped the table and gestured for her to look at him, then glanced at the green wall and asked, "Are you still selling potted plants on the side?" Lin Mi almost said it was only when Xu Yuan who bought, but she changed her answer to, "Occasionally." "Do you have any other side jobs?" "My rent counts as income too." Teske, you hardly go out and you don't get deliveries often. You must have saved quite a bit of money, right? Chungyu asked casually, but to his surprise, Lin Mi watched him suspiciously. "I don't have much saved." "What's with that look? Are you afraid I'm after your money?" Chungyu said, exasperated. Lin Mi swallowed hard and stiffened her neck. "You can't be too careful." Hearing this, Chungyu should have been furious, but for some reason, he found Lin Mi's stubbornness adorable, even if she was in the wrong. He couldn't help but laugh. When Lin Mi looked over, he quickly composed himself, shot her a fierce glare, and said, eat more. Be careful, I might come for your money in the middle of the night." Lin Mi took his irritation as him being annoyed with her, and since she could never quite read his thoughts, she stopped responding and lowered her head to eat. But then Chungyu spoke up again. "Why don't you ask me something?" Lin Mi looked at him blankly. "Ask what?" "Ask about work. Ask about income. Ask about relationship status. What can't be asked? Can't you hold a conversation?" Chungyu mentally yelled in frustration. Yet he remained aloof, stealing a glance at her, letting her ponder it on her own while he focused on his food. If he continued to have any expectations of her, he'd be a fool. Lin Mi invited Chungyu to have a meal together, thinking it might help to ease the directness of her earlier words. Little did she know that from that day on, he would cling to her, insisting on dining together whenever they stayed in. She initially thought he was a meat eater, but it turned out he, like her, mostly ate vegetarian food. However, his personality was still off-putting. Even when enjoying a meal, he would always nitpick and complain about something. Sometimes after they ate, when she wasn't working and he wasn't going out, they would sit down and chat. For instance, one evening, Lin Mi was lounging on the sofa, the dim yellow light casting a nostalgic aura over her, but also adding a touch of melancholy. Chungyu, for some reason, brought up the topic of loneliness. "You've been alone for so long. Don't you feel lonely?" "No one isn't lonely," Lin Mi replied, dodging the question. "So, when do you feel the loneliest?" Chungyu pressed on. "There are many times." As Lin Mi spoke, a slight smile graced her lips, but Chungyu felt his heart tighten. He looked at her, encouraging her to continue. After a long pause, Lin Mi slowly said, "When I wake up from a nap and see the dim yellow light, I often have to think about when I fell asleep to determine whether it's today or tomorrow, like counting the leaves on the hanging basket on this wall, just like in a long novel. There was a time I suddenly wanted to see the cat downstairs, but after waiting for a long time, it never came." Her voice was steady, neither high nor low, neither sad nor happy, just tinged with a hint of melancholy. Chungyu watched her, fighting the urge to embrace her. In that moment, he realized that she had changed in his heart. He didn't want her to be alone anymore. He wanted to sweep away her loneliness, to see her smile and her vibrant self. "I'm not gay," Chungyu suddenly blurted out an unrelated statement. Lin Mi merely glanced at him again and nodded, indicating she understood. Chungyu didn't feel the need to explain further. He sensed that since she didn't pry, she wasn't bothered by his little deception. A big smile crept onto his face, and his mood visibly improved. As the sun set, the warm light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling window, enveloping this moment of tranquility. When Lin Mi's parents came over to cause a scene, Cheng Yu was still asleep. Initially a bit dazed, he quickly got up and opened the door when he heard things being thrown. He didn't go out empty-handed. Grabbing a pillow, he hurled it toward the sofa, shouting, "What the hell? Can't I even get some sleep? It's early morning, and you're making a ruckus?" His shout immediately silenced the unexpected male and female intruders. People tend to back down when faced with toughness, and the couple, previously aggressive, fell silent. Lin Mi had been pushed to the ground and exchanged a glance with Cheng Yu, trying to signal him not to worry about her. But upon seeing him giving her a look, she felt a sense of relief. The man spoke first. "Who are you? Are you Lin Mi's man?" "Huh." Cheng Yu laughed as if he had heard the biggest joke. "Don't worry about who I am. Did you just say are Lin Mi?" Cheng Yu, when feeling arrogant and lazy, acted like an immature teenager. At that moment, with his eyes narrowed and a cold smile on his lips, he seemed quite intimidating, enough to scare them off. The man instinctively looked at Lin Mi, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. Reluctantly, he swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, she's our daughter." "Oh, your daughter?" Cheng Yu drawled, sounding like a villain about to unleash their fury. Sure enough, the next moment, he took 2 quick steps, yanked Lin Mi by the collar, pulled her up from the ground, and pressed her against the wall, gripping her chin. "Didn't you say you had no parents? These two just dropped down from the sky, huh? Damn it. You dared to lie to me. If I hadn't kept an eye out and been cautious, I would have been tricked by a little girl like you. And you dare say you have no money? I'd chop you up." At this point, he glanced at the couple, pointing at them as he said, "None of you is getting away today. 50,000, no more, no less. Hand it over and we'll call it even. If you can't come up with it, the old ones can sell their organs, and the young ones can sell themselves. There are plenty of ways to pay back the debt." Lin Mi's parents exchanged glances, unsure if it was true or not. But upon seeing Cheng Yu take out his phone, they heard him say, "You'd better not think about running. My brothers live nearby. We'll settle this today so you won't have to." Before he finished, the couple shouted, "Is that money that Lin Mi borrowed? What does it have to do with us? We came here to get money from her to survive. You deal with your own problems." With that, they bolted toward the door, without waiting for Cheng Yu to react. The door slammed shut with a loud bang. To keep up appearances, Cheng Yu shouted a couple of times, "Don't run," before letting Lin Mi go and checking if the door was locked. "Are you alright?" Cheng Yu turned back to ask. Earlier, he had heard the 2 people claiming to be Lin Mi's parents cursing her, saying she was cold-hearted and indifferent, while throwing things and demanding money. Seeing Lin Mi's firm attitude about not having any money prompted him to think of this evil for evil tactic. Lin Mi didn't respond, and Cheng Yu worried that he had been too rough and hurt her. He quickly lifted her chin to check. "What's wrong? Did I hurt you?" Before he could finish, he noticed she had started crying silently. This wasn't the first time Lin Mi faced her irresponsible parents, but it was the first time she cried. She thought she was strong enough to face their bullying and accusations without reacting, but seeing Cheng Yu stand up for her at that moment made her realize that her strength was merely a facade of vulnerability. Inside, she felt wronged, scared, and deeply longed for such support. Cheng Yu felt somewhat at a loss. He had seen girls cry before, their faces streaked with tears, and he could easily make them laugh again when he felt like it. But at this moment, all he felt was heartache and a sense of helplessness. There truly are people who, when you see them crying, make your heart ache painfully, wanting to share their suffering. He pulled her into his arms, soothing her like a baby, gently patting her back while whispering, "I'm here. Don't be afraid." Lin Mi paused for a long time before she stabilized her emotions, saying she wanted to be alone for a while. However, Cheng Yu wouldn't let her go. "You can't just use me and toss me aside," Cheng Yu said playfully. He truly couldn't bear to leave her alone to drown in her sadness, just like that time when she sat on the couch, engulfed in endless loneliness, which pained him. Lin Mi pushed him away, saying, "Don't use words like that." Cheng Yu smiled and held her tighter. Whether it was taking advantage of the moment or exploiting the situation, Cheng-yu was quite satisfied to have her in his arms and wouldn't let go. They sat together for a long time, so long that Lin Mi finally relaxed, finding a comfortable position in his embrace and slowly began to share her story. It turned out that when Lin Mi was 7 years old, her mother had abandoned her at the Lin family, where she was working, and disappeared with her father to escape debt. Fortunately, the Lin family took her in, supported her education, and when they immigrated abroad, they left her this apartment. However, her biological parents eventually tracked her down, only to ask for money. She had given them all her savings, repaying their parental kindness, but they were never satisfied and often caused trouble. Cheng-yu didn't say much, just assured her not to worry. He would help her deal with the situation. "How was my performance just now?" Cheng-yu changed the topic to something lighter. "Because when I was a kid, my dad went bankrupt, and some people came to our house to collect debts. I was about 12 or 13 at the time, having watched too many Hong Kong movies. I dashed into the kitchen, grabbed a kitchen knife, slammed it on the table, and dramatically said the classic line, 'No money, only a life to take.'
They were really scared of me."
He said it so lightly, yet Lin Mi could sense the underlying sadness. She instinctively hugged him tighter and gently patted his back, just as he had done. Cheng-yu was actually quite perceptive. He worried that Lin Mi might feel embarrassed about her family troubles being exposed, so he decided to share his own family issues. "Actually, our family has its share of difficulties too. My dad, at his age, should know better and be bold enough to act when he needs to, right? Yet, there's this awkward teenager living inside him. He clearly likes someone but keeps buying her paintings one by one and occasionally runs into her, yet he still won't admit it. Now, he's even summoned me back to help him pursue my stepmother. What kind of nonsense is that? Is he pursuing my teacher? Yeah, it's Wen Shuyuan's mom. Back then, you really thought I was pursuing Wen Shuyuan? That's just confusing. We're not compatible. Even if my dad marries his mom, I won't call him brother, and you aren't allowed to either. What does that have to do with me?" Being faced with such a dense person, Cheng-yu felt internally frustrated. After a while, Lin Mi suddenly said, "Your father seems quite cute. He probably wants you to see if you think my teacher is good before he officially pursues her, right?" Cheng-yu was taken aback. He hadn't considered that angle, but he was more focused on the word cute. "Maybe. Actually, I'm quite similar to my dad. We both have a tendency to be ambiguous." Originally, Cheng-yu wanted her to compliment him by calling him cute, but who knew she just said, "Oh," and didn't elaborate. No elaboration at all. Cheng-yu was again furious, tightening his hold on her to vent his frustration. He couldn't remember who had said that if he had expectations for her, he was like a dog. Fine, a dog he was. To keep Lin Mi from having time to think about her troublesome parents, the next day, Cheng-yu dragged her to the supermarket, saying he had taught himself cooking out of necessity during his studies abroad and wanted to show off his skills. They bought the ingredients and returned, with Cheng-yu cooking, preparing both main dishes and dessert. "Try this." Cheng-yu broke off a small piece of cake and held it to Lin Mi's mouth. She accepted it, praised his cooking skills, and sincerely thanked him. She knew he wanted to make her happy. However, Cheng-yu's intentions were not so innocent. His fingers brushed against her lips, and the soft sensation made him tighten in the lower abdomen. When she smiled sweetly at him and said, "Thank you," Cheng-yu felt her smile carried the sweetness of the cake, melting his heart. He stared blankly at Lin Mi, who mistook his behavior for awkwardness. Remembering his past actions, she suddenly had a brilliant idea and broke off a piece of cake for him, thinking he might appreciate the gesture of reciprocity. This time, Cheng-yu was completely stunned. He instinctively covered his pounding heart, fearing it might leap out in excitement. When Lin Mi noticed he was slow to respond, she thought she had misread the situation and was about to retract her hand. However, Cheng-yu suddenly grabbed her wrist tightly. As he ate the cake, his gaze remained fixed on her, burning with intensity, making her heart race. But once he finished, he silently left the kitchen. Lin Mi didn't find it unusual. She simply recalled his gaze and felt her ears getting warm. This time, Cheng-yu wasn't being petty. He was afraid that if he stayed longer, it would become more than just wanting to eat cake. Yes, Cheng-yu had developed desires and was worried that he might turn into a wolf, scaring away Lin Mi, this little white rabbit. So, he had to retreat to his room to calm himself, hoping that what he couldn't see wouldn't affect him. But alas, that person's brows, eyes, and smile were etched so clearly in his mind that even with his eyes closed, he could still see her. Sweet torment was likely just this, right? Cheng-yu lay in his room when he received a call from his father, asking him to report back home and discuss the situation regarding Lin Mi. The next day, when he returned home, he found that Lin Mi was nowhere to be seen. The first thought that crossed his mind was that her parents had taken her away, and he quickly pulled out his phone to call her. Lin Mi answered the call quickly with a casual hello, which eased his heart momentarily. However, it soon lifted again as he noticed that it was quite noisy on her end, almost like she was at a KTV. Cheng-yu didn't bother with the cliched questions like, "Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with?" But he was eager to know nonetheless. Eventually, he managed to ask her in a roundabout way, using the pretext of wanting her to bring him food, leading her to give him the address. He also complained about the noise, prompting her to reveal that she was at a class reunion. When she asked what food he wanted her to bring, he shrugged and said he didn't want to wait and would eat nearby instead. Lin Mi was used to his quirky personality and didn't think much of it, completely unaware that his mood was fluctuating because she hadn't updated him on her whereabouts. Although she didn't want to attend the reunion, she couldn't resist the class leader's enthusiasm. Now that she was there, she felt isolated, merely observing from a distance. As dinner progressed, she overheard a group of girls gossiping about a handsome guy they had spotted in the bathroom. One girl gushed about how cool he was, saying to a hot girl, "I'm quite picky. I'm not into fake stuff." The comment inexplicably reminded her of Cheng-yu, as she thought it perfectly fit his arrogant personality. Suddenly, she felt a pang of longing for him and wondered if he had called earlier because he was thinking of her too. Seeing everyone else mingling and having fun, Lin Mi decided not to waste her time there. She quickly stood up and headed for the door, thankfully unnoticed by anyone trying to stop her. Once outside, she hurried along, eager to see him, regretting why she had come to such a faraway place. Lost in thought, she wasn't paying attention and bumped right into someone. "I told you, you're too light. If someone wasn't paying attention, you could get knocked over," came the familiar, sarcastic voice. Lin Mi looked up in surprise and met Cheng-yu's teasing gaze. In that instant, everything else faded away. Her heart was solely focused on him, and she instinctively wanted to embrace him. Cheng-yu originally thought that after that hug, their relationship would become closer. However, Lin Mi remained oblivious, acting as if it were not her who had initiated that embrace. This left him restless, tossing and turning in bed that night, his heart troubled by conflicting emotions. That evening, when he discovered that the air conditioner in his room wouldn't turn on, he felt an overwhelming sense of excitement and hurriedly knocked on Lin Mi's door. "What's up?" Lin Mi asked. "My air conditioner is broken, it won't turn on," Cheng-yu replied, struggling to suppress his excitement. Lin Mi frowned. "It's probably just the batteries. Let me take a look." Cheng-yu had been too caught up in his own happiness to consider the possibility that it could just be the batteries. This realization hit him like a thunderbolt. Before he could think, he pushed Lin Mi into her room and quickly locked the door. When she looked at him with questioning eyes, he refused to explain, maintaining his usual arrogant demeanor as he flopped down on her bed with a contented sigh. "I'm staying here for the night. We can check if it's the batteries tomorrow." "Why don't you sleep here, and I'll go to the guest room? We have a fan," Lin Mi suggested. "Lin Mi," Cheng-yu growled through gritted teeth. Seeing her puzzled expression, he decisively pulled her down onto the bed, rolling on top of her. "Why did you hug me that night?" he demanded. Even in such a moment, he stubbornly refused to say the word, like making him an exception among young men. Lin Mi turned her gaze away from him, refusing to answer. In the days that followed, she had sensed his lingering resentment, but she was still caught in her indecision, unsure whether to embrace her feelings for him or extinguish this budding romance altogether. She had previously managed well on her own, but now he had barged in, and she didn't know how long he would stay or how long they could love each other. She disliked this feeling of helplessness, which made her peaceful life feel unpredictable and tumultuous. Lost in her thoughts, she unconsciously bit her lip. Seeing this, Cheng Yu's throat tightened. With his mind clouded by desire, he leaned down and kissed her. Cheng Yu felt something was off as he kissed, and when he opened his eyes, he realized Lin Mi's face was wet with tears. You. Cheng Yu didn't know if he wanted to ask, "What's wrong?" or "Are you unwilling?" He barely managed to say one word when Lin Mi suddenly clung to his neck and pulled him back, pressing completely against her. Having already decided to follow her heart and like him after that kiss, Lin Mi couldn't help but feel conflicted and ended up in tears. She didn't want to explain these mixed feelings to him, so she took the initiative to cling to his neck and pull him closer. What she didn't realize was that Cheng Yu had been keeping his distance before, and now that she had taken the initiative, they were completely pressed together, making her aware of his unusual reaction. The courage she had to disregard everything evaporated in an instant, and she could only cover her face, unable to look at him. At this moment, Cheng Xiaoya was feeling uneasy due to her contradictory attitude, and his desires were exposed, which didn't align with his usual proud and reserved self. He found it hard to continue trying to win her favor. However, seeing her clearly embarrassed and not knowing what to do, he felt reassured. He was sure Lin Mi liked him, but he didn't understand why she was crying. With tremendous effort, he managed to restrain himself, pulling her hands away from her face and asking her what was wrong. Lin Mi blushed but wouldn't say anything. Fearing he would pry further, she simply kissed him, awkward and clumsy, yet straightforward and passionate. Cheng Xiaoya's reason crumbled completely, transforming him into a wolf that couldn't resist devouring his beloved little rabbit. But he was mischievous. While she was left dazed from the kiss, he still coaxed her into saying she liked him before finally contentedly replying, "I like you too." The next morning, Cheng Yu woke up early and, glancing at Lin Mi still asleep beside him, found he couldn't fall back asleep. Lin Mi hadn't mentioned that it was her first time, and Cheng Yu, being the proud person he was, wouldn't admit that he was a novice as well. The two of them had fumbled through the night to finally share their first experience. In that moment when he entered her, she cried out in pain, and tears fell again, making him groggily realize what her earlier tears were about. Thinking back, he figured she might be scared. With her slow-to-warm personality, she usually loved slowly and not intensely, but definitely loved for the long haul. However, having been abandoned before, she had some mistrust, so she feared that he would leave when her feelings grew strong. With these thoughts in mind, he leaned down and kissed her forehead, proudly saying, "You've met me. I'm not the kind of person to just leave." That kiss was meant to be tender, but having tasted the sweet flavor, Cheng Xiaoya immediately lost his composure. Fortunately, the doorbell rang just in time to stop him from getting carried away. He covered Lin Mi's ears with a pillow and got up to answer the door. As soon as Cheng Zhenhai entered, he sensed something was different about his son today. But before he could think further, he awkwardly asked, "Are you and Aunt Chening really getting married so soon? Son, how did you manage it?" Cheng Yu was puzzled. "Dad, I didn't help you pursue your wife, but I helped you pursue my daughter-in-law." "Then you're lying to me. Do you know I was so excited I couldn't sleep all night?" Cheng Zhenhai exclaimed angrily. Cheng Yu was shocked. "Dad, how did you read my message? I said to bring the household registration book. I said you have a daughter-in-law, not that you have a wife." It turned out the Cheng family had a family rule that only their own wives could sleep with them, so Cheng Yu felt he had to quickly catch up since he'd gotten on the train first. After Lin Mi fell asleep last night, he had sent a message to his father. Cheng Zhenhai pulled out his phone and checked carefully. There was indeed an added character of son, but he wouldn't lower his face to admit it, insisting, "I don't know, your old man's eyesight is failing. Why don't you just call me instead?" The genes certainly proved powerful. Looking at Cheng Jinhai allowed Chengyu to forgive him. At this moment, Chengyu completely forgot his previous mischief. He mentally repeated, "I won't fuss with him," twice before saying, "Give me the household registration book. You can go now. My daughter-in-law hasn't woken up yet. We'll go see you tomorrow." Hearing Chengyu specifically emphasize the phrase daughter-in-law, Cheng Jinhai snorted coldly, tossing the household registration book to him and not forgetting to tease, "With such a temper, don't scare my daughter-in-law." Chengyu grinned. "My daughter-in-law has already said she likes me. Lin Mi, having searched and found me, she treasures me." Cheng Jinhai couldn't stand his boasting, selfish. "What was I asking you to do? You only care about yourself. If it weren't for me, could you have met our daughter-in-law? Forget it, forget it. My son is unreliable. I'll have to go personally." Chengyu happily sent his father off with a "wish you success." When he turned around, he saw Lin Mi standing at the door, looking shyly at him. "You heard everything?" Chengyu returned to his proud demeanor, lifting his chin and asking. Lin Mi nodded, her eyes turning red again. She really hadn't expected to meet him. "Don't cry. I'm not the type to bully my daughter-in-law. Don't let people misunderstand." Lin Mi didn't want to cry either, but she simply couldn't control it. As Cheng Xiaoya wiped her tears, he began to pick at her. "Such a disobedient daughter-in-law. I'm the only one willing to treat you well." Lin Mi couldn't help but smile through her tears. How could he be so stubborn? Seeing her finally smile, Chengyu handed her the household registration book. "Here, this is our household registration book. Originally, it was just for 2 people, but now it's going to be 2 books. You take it for now." Lin Mi stared at the red book for a long while before reaching out to take it. Her heart was filled with immense happiness, and she momentarily couldn't help but want to cry again. Afraid Chengyu would feel sorry, she hid in his embrace. Cheng Xiaoya thought it was quite worth it to exchange a household registration book for Lin Mi's active embrace, so he happily returned the hug. Years later, Cheng Xiaoya became Cheng Dage, but didn't change his proud nature, now with a new habit, bringing up old grievances. "Back then, when I gave you the household registration book, I was proposing to you. Wasn't your reaction a bit too calm?" Lin Mi had also become Lin Nai by now, and had perfected the skill of smoothing him over. Looking at him and smiling, she smiled just like that sunny and gentle morning in Cheng Dage's memories. She smiled and said, "Having searched and found you, that's why I like you." Cheng Dage didn't say anything, just smiled back, still as foolish as that awkward young man from years ago. After a long while, he finally replied, "I knew you liked me." And so, this adorable pair lived happily ever after.